May we all remain standing for the national anthem. Thank you very much. We may be seated. It's a very good afternoon, which is almost turning into evening, and a resounding welcome to the Sunshine City, which is the capital city of our beautiful country, Zimbabwe. My name is Tariro, and I'm going to be directing the program this afternoon. The guest of honor, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, MNANGAGWA. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Mozambique, HEFJ Nyusi. Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Honorable KCD MOHADI. UNAIDS Executive Director, Ms. Winnie Byanyima. Society for AIDS in Africa and State for Provincial Affairs and Devolution for Harare Metropolitan Province, Comrade C. Tavengwa. Minister of Health and Child Care, who is also the Vice President of ICASA 2023, Dr. Mombeshora. Regional Directors of Government ministers here present, ministers from neighboring countries, members of the Diplomatic Corps, UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, Mr. Edward Callon, and heads of UN agencies in Zimbabwe, members of Parliament here present, Chief Secretary and Deputy Chief Secretaries here present, Permanent Secretary for Ministry of Health and Child Care, Dr. Aspect Maunganidze, and other permanent Board Chair for the National AIDS Council, Mrs. Margaret Mehlomakulu, and other NAC board members here present. The Chief Executive Officer for the National AIDS Council, who is also head of ICASA 2023 Local Secretariat, Dr. Bernard Mazima. Service chiefs, development partners, members of the media. We request your permission that we ride around these protocols for all speakers. Thank you. Permission granted, and this is a note to all our speakers. This is the official opening of the 22nd edition of ICASA, the International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa. And it is brought to you by Society for AIDS in Africa and ICASA. And for this year, with support from the government of Zimbabwe. Let's clap hands for ICASA. Successes. We need to note and be concerned, all of us here. And why am I saying that we need to be concerned? This links to this edition's theme, which is talking about and reminding us that AIDS is not over. We need to address inequalities, accelerate inclusion and innovation. Currently, 30 million people who are living with HIV are on treatment. And people who are not on treatment. And who are these people? Mostly they are people who are actually facing those inequalities that I initially mentioned. And we need to find those people. As much as we look at what has worked and what has not worked, it's important that we remember AIDS is not over. When COVID-19 ravaged the global world, we tended to then forget these are the responses that we need to continue carrying forward. So let's just take note. As we continue with our program, we are going to have the introduction of the UN system by the UN resident coordinator, Mr. Edward Talom. Mr. Talom.
President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, please allow me to ride on existing protocols already established. Good afternoon. Your Excellency, Dr. Emerson Mnangagwa, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, my task this afternoon is simple: to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished UN principals in this conference. Seated right on your left here, we have the UNAIDS Executive Director, Madam Winnie Byanyima. Next to her is the Regional Director of WHO, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti. And last but not the least is Madam Lydia Zigomo, one of ours from Zimbabwe. Your Excellency, besides the UN principals who will be featuring in the program this afternoon, We have 22 UN entities behind your government supporting not only the ICASA organizations in various capacities, but also with the government of Zimbabwe in ending AIDS, supporting the country to achieve its vision to become an upper middle income society by 2030 and Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. Your Excellency, as we come together to deliberate on the International Conference on AIDS and Sexually Transmitted Infections, I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge and congratulate your government for bringing us together. When it comes to such extensive work, besides your government's effort, I would like to acknowledge our First Lady, Her Excellency Dr. Auxilia MNANGAGWA, for her dedication to community engagement, investment, and her extensive work in response to HIV, STI, and other noble causes, including fighting drugs and substance abuse among youths as main drivers for HIV infections and other social terrors. Your Excellency, it is heartening to see strong engagement of the Mother of the Nation through translation of your whole of society and whole of government approach. Her efforts go beyond HIV and encompasses broader mobilizations which endeavors for Zimbabwe's Vision 2030 and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal by 2030. Equally, here today, I'm honored to see the UN delegation is being represented by 3 powerful women in UN leadership, led by UNAIDS Executive Director, responsible for coordinating 11 UN joint program agencies in the fight against HIV and AIDS. Your Excellency, what have we learned over time? When women are empowered and take their rightful space and places in society, the transformation takes place. Inequalities are addressed, and inclusion and innovations are accelerated, not only to tackle HIV and STI, but also work towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Zimbabwe has witnessed firsthand the transformative potential of devolution and community approach to addressing inequality and accelerating mechanisms and innovation in various aspects, such as the mobilization of resources under the AIDS levy, the establishment of schools and teachers throughout the country, efforts in combating natural disasters like Cyclone Idai, and more recently in tackling the challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic. During my 2 years in the country and my visit in various areas, I have seen that the government of Zimbabwe recognizes the importance of community leadership and has placed a strong emphasis on devolution. This highlights the value of empowering communities to fashion solutions to the challenges they face, and not only in ending AIDS and SDI, but also in other areas of development challenges. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, while Zimbabwe has made commendable progress in the fight against HIV epidemic and STI, as in other countries, there are still enormous challenges to overcome in achieving the goals of ending AIDS and STI. These challenges include disparities in access to HIV services based on age, gender, and geography. Adolescent girls and young women are disproportionately affected by new infections, while children and key populations have limited access to services. The national scale and implementation of programs targeting these groups is yet to be achieved. To effectively end the pandemic in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we must undertake 4 critical actions. 1, we need to scale up HIV prevention and treatment programs to cover all subpopulation groups with a particular focus on adolescent girls and young women. 2nd, community leadership and the engagement of men are crucial in addressing social norms related to gender equality and gender-based violence. 3rd, enacting and enforcing laws and policies for the population group is essential, as well as sustaining initiatives like social contracting and strengthening evidence generation. 4th, adequate funding and economic opportunities should be allocated to communities, as this will connect individuals to person-centered public health services, foster trust, and build providers' accountability. Additionally, ending stigma and discrimination is a crucial aspect of ensuring that no one is left behind. And as we say here in Zimbabwe, no place is left behind too. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, HIV/AIDS remains a threat to socio-economic progress and has the potential to destabilize society and hinder human development. Addressing the underlying factors contributing to the spread of HIV, such as gender inequality and practices that perpetuate sexual and gender-based violence, is crucial. These discussions emphasize the need to prioritize HIV/AIDS prevention and care with universal health coverage and the integration of HIV services into primary healthcare systems, with a strong emphasis on strengthening community health systems. Political commitments, increased financing, innovation, research, and advocacy for human rights and gender equality are key to this paradigm shift. By addressing these areas, we are and we can overcome barriers and accelerating inclusions and innovation are critical. Distinguished delegates, I can assure you that you have come to the right place where you can take leaf from Zimbabwe's development. I wish you all a very successful deliberation and welcome to Zimbabwe.
It's my pleasure and honor to invite the Minister of State and Devolution for Harare Metropolitan Province to welcome us to the Sunshine City of Harare.
Thank you, Master of Ceremony, Tariro Makanga. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Dr. E.D. MNANGAGWA, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Mozambique, His Excellency Nyusi, Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, General Retired Dr. C.G.D.N. Chiwenga, Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Retired KCD MOHADI, Honorable Minister of Health and Child Care, Honorable Dr. Mombeshora, Ministers, Chief Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Dr. Rushwaya, Chairman of the Public Service Commission, Dr. Vincent Hungwe, Service Chiefs here present, Secretary for Health and Child Care, Dr. A. Maungadidze, and all permanent Joint United Nations Program on HIV/AIDS representative, Ms. Winnie, Byanyima, representative from the Regional Office for Africa on World Health Organization, WHO, Dr. Chindo Rebecca Moeti, representative from the Malaria Vaccines in Africa, Professor Adrian Hill, United Nations Population Fund representative, Dr. Natalia and Kanem, our ambassadors, representatives from the community, distinguished delegates, comrades and friends, ladies and gentlemen. I feel greatly honored and pleased to welcome you, Your Excellency, and everyone here present at the International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa, ICASA 2023, as Harare Metropolitan Province. We are greatly excited to be hosting the opening ceremony of ICASA 2023, and on behalf of all the Metropolitan Province has a decentralized developmental structure that also covers the area of HIV and AIDS. The HIV and AIDS structure incorporates all government ministries and vibrant HIV and AIDS programming in the entire country. This has significantly lowered the new HIV infections. These programs are largely driven by communities themselves under the and blend well with this year's World AIDS Day 2023, which says, and I quote, "Let communities lead," unquote. With communities at the forefront, we are assured to achieve the universal goal of ending AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. Your Excellencies and all the distinguished delegates, Harare Metropolitan Province enjoys peace and tranquility, not as portrayed by our detractors. I therefore urge our visitors to find time and enjoy some of our beautiful sights in and around Harare. Before I conclude my welcome remarks, it is important to note that some cases of cholera in some parts of our high-density suburbs were recorded, but the situation is under control. I would therefore urge all our visitors to follow prescribed guidelines and protocols of cholera prevention given by our Ministry of Health and Child Care. With this, I wish you fruitful deliberations. I thank you, Ndatenda Siabonga. Abrigado. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for welcoming us to the Sunshine City of Harare. And indeed, when it comes to the response, the HIV response, let communities lead, like what he said. We are going to have the welcome address by the ICASA 2023 and SAR President, Honorable Dr. Pagwesese David Parirenyatwa.
Director of Programs, Tariro Makanga. Let me recognize His Excellency, the President of Zimbabwe, Dr. MNANGAGWA. Let me also recognize the President of the Republic of Botswana, of Mozambique. Let me recognize the Minister of State for Provincial Affairs, but before I do that, I think we need to recognize our two Vice Presidents, the Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, General Retired CTGN Chiwenga, and also let me now recognize the Minister of State for Provincial Affairs and Devolution for Harare, Charles Tavengwa, the Minister of Health and Child Care, Dr. Douglas Mombeshora, who is also the Vice President for ICASA 2023. I would like to recognize also the UNAIDS Executive Director, Winnie, the regional Lydia Zigomo. I will now write on the protocols that have been said so that we can move forward. Otherwise, we'll make more mixtures. But Your Excellency, the history of HIV and AIDS in terms of fighting HIV and AIDS has been long. And since then, we've been fighting HIV and AIDS. And within the region, that is what has been happening so far. But we forget that that time, when you got HIV, it was almost like a death sentence. And there is hope. There are a lot of people now who are living normal lives on ARVs. And we want to applaud the science that has led. For AIDS in Africa, which was started in 1989 by African luminaries who felt that the fight for HIV had been centered in Europe. Society for AIDS in Africa. And this was formed in 1989 in DRC. Since then, the Society for AIDS in Africa has then, every 2 years, they've organized a conference called ICASA, which is the International Conference on AIDS and STIs. And this is such a conference. 2 years ago, we had the same conference in Durban, but it was virtual because of the COVID virus that was raging at the time. So it has been every 2 years we've had this ICASA. This year, Your Excellency, we have already registered 4,500 people who are attending this particular conference, both virtually and physically. And we're pleased that when we started, to prevent a child getting HIV from their mother. The PMTCT is something that has to be emphasized. And our First Ladies are together with our UN bodies. They were all there. And that really strengthened the fight against it. We emphasize, as ICASA, is anchored on 3 principles. That as we fight guesswork. It's science. We have to fight HIV scientifically. And that is what is being done. That's the first thing. We base it on the communities. The communities must lead. And when we say communities, right up from the top, right to the bottom, those communities helps us. So communities are very, very key. These communities type of people. We're talking for partners, our donors. We're talking of leaders in the communities, like traditional leaders, all those people come together, and indeed they are what constructs our HIV. And I'm glad, Your Excellency, you have led from the front. The political will is definitely there, and is really demonstrated by you being here. ICASA comes to Zimbabwe, and it has come in full force. You won the bid. I really want to thank the government of Zimbabwe, sir. Everything is in place, and we are, I'm sure, going to have a resounding, successful ICASA. When we fight HIV also, we must include now the fight against TB, because TB and HIV are very related. 80% of the people who are TB positive are the same way as HIV is passed. So we have also targeted hepatitis as ICASA. The third thing we've targeted as ICASA is malaria. We know that if you're HIV positive and you're not on treatment and you catch malaria, the consequences are more dire than if you're on treatment. So they are also related. So we fight HIV, TB, malaria, hepatitis B, and this, I think, is the comprehensive approach that we want. Finally, Your Excellency, we need to tell our youths who that dividend is where HIV is grown most. The youth, and we had a conference, pre-conference of the youth this morning here. The youth must be alert and go back to what we used to do. Behavioral change, condom use, the very basic things that we used to do to prevent HIV. And that the youth must go back to, because it's now being compounded by alcohol abuse and drug abuse. So now HIV, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all those things must be packaged appropriately for the youth so that they're able to fight HIV in reality. Finally, we have here satellites, meetings. We have plenaries, that will be about 23 plenaries. We have abstracts that are over 800 of our scientists, our researchers, our communities. We have a huge community village outside where the communities from all over Zimbabwe and around can go there and exercise what they know about HIV and talk about it. We have got exhibitors on the other side, Your Excellency. We've got over 30 exhibitors, people who are supporting this and are exhibiting what they think can help us with HIV. We also have, and I think this is very, very important, sessions like these ones, plenaries, but also special sessions, where we think that people have got something very special to offer, are given a platform to talk and share with us. So let me apologize again, Your Excellency, for the salutations that were quite mixed up, but it happens. But in the whole, I'm pleased that this has been good, and I hope that we will have a very fruitful ICASA 2023 in Harare. Thank you. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parirenyatwa, Sir President. He was saying he is a president with a small p, just to separate him from our excellencies. Now we are going to have a brief entertainment from House of Talent. you. Thank you. Thank you so much, House of Talent. Indeed, you are so full of talent. Thank you and well done. We continue with our program, and I would now like to invite Yolanda Munyengwa. She is going to give us remarks from the community. We heard how critical the community is. So community working together with science, with also the leadership, we will get there. Yolanda.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to stand before you today as we gather for the ICASA 2023 conference. This year we come together under the powerful theme, AIDS is not over. Addressing inequalities, accelerating inclusion and innovation with communities leading. The theme for this conference resonates deeply with the current situation for people living with HIV. It highlights the urgent needs to not only make progress in combating HIV and AIDS, but it also emphasizes the importance of addressing inequalities and accelerate the inclusion of people left behind, such as key population, young people, children to gap, and AIDS by 2023. We find ourselves at a crucial juncture where our collection efforts are the key shaping a brighter future. Speaking of the future, more than 4,700 children are born with HIV annually in Zimbabwe, a situation that health officials are working on it to bring under control by encouraging early testing of pregnant women and scaling up the triple elimination of mother-to-child transmission, EMTCT. About 30% underdiagnosed children eventually die by the age of 2 years. We will see in this day age babies that are not tested for HIV. If you take 100 children born with HIV and parents are unaware, in this year of the life, we lose 30 of them. This is how bad it is. By 2 years of age, if you do not do anything about it, we lose another 30. Because of lack of testing and treatment, a delayed diagnosis is a serious issue in the country. These children will die. If not, they grow up, they'll ill, and they'll develop meningitis, which affects their development. Key population as the world celebrates the turn of tide on HIV, with many countries making remarkable progress towards ending AIDS. Key populations in Africa are seized with perpetual strife and suffering. We contend with human rights application, a surge of anti-gender and anti-human rights and anti-homosexual legislation. Allies are thin and are far, and the HIV pandemic continues to ravage our countries. Rates of new infection in the past decade have continued to escalate for MSM, transgender, and persons with progress has been made for Pagwesese. And yet again, as we speak, despite enforcement of an engaged anti-homosexual bill, Uganda received a full grant of GC7 grant despite calls by communities redirect funding towards addressing these structural barriers that procedure equitable access to HIV services. It feels like we are shouting in the desert. We take this opportunity for candid conversation to ask, demand of allies to walk a mile in our shoes. To understand that pains of inequality cut deeper in the skin of the marginalized, creating a huge reserve of them and us. No, we can do better if solidarity was genuine and frank. Over the years, significant strides have been made in the battle against HIV and AIDS. However, this fight is far from over. It demands our continuous dedication, innovation, collaboration. By accelerating progress, we can ensure that the goals have been achieved swiftly and effectively. We must move forward with a sense of urgency, leaving no one behind, providing access to life-saving treatments and prevention methods to all those in need. Building resilience is equally important. As we face a rapidly changing landscape in the field of HIV and AIDS, we must anticipate and adapt to the evolving challenges that arise. Our resilience lies in our ability to learn from past experiences, embrace new technologies, and empower communities affected by HIV and AIDS. By building resilience, we stand any obstacles that come our way and guarantee the sustainability of our efforts for generations to come. The ICASA 2023 conference serves as a platform of knowledge to exchange, collaborate, and introspection. We must seize the opportunity to share insights, foster partnership, and strengthen our resolve to fight against HIV/AIDS together. We can amplify our impact and ensure that progress is not hindered by any barriers, whether they are social, economic, or cultural. Let us be reminded that our work extends beyond this conference walls. It expands to clinics, health facilities, community spaces, and countries across the board. We must engage policymakers, healthcare providers, presidents, researchers, and civil society organizations in our pursuit to end AIDS by 2030. By uniting our voices and resources and the civil society organizations in our pursuit to end AIDS by 2030, diversity of young women and girls, people with disabilities, women, key population, and all those affected by this devastating disease. As we gather here today, let us renew our commitment to the cause. Let us revolute prevention strategies, enhance access to treatment, and eliminate stigma and discrimination and criminalize towards associated with HIV and AIDS. Let us address inequalities, knowing that time of the essence, and let us accelerate inclusion, innovation, recognizing that our ability to adapt and overcome will redefine our success in the face of future challenges. Together, we have power to transform lives, communities, and legends. Let us leave the conference not only inspired, but equipped with the tools, knowledge, and renewed determination to create a world free from stigma, discrimination, criminalized, because now we will end AIDS by 2023. Thank you all for unwavering commitment to this vital cause. Let us embark on this journey of progress and resilience together. Let the communities lead. Let the communities lead. Let the communities lead. Thank you. So, I have to... Yes, thank you. Okay. So here I need to submit the statement with community's priorities to Winnie Byanyima. Yes, thank you.
That is a powerful statement, powerful action as well from Ms. Byanyima. Thank you very much, Yolanda, for clearly articulating the community issues, community demands, community needs. Indeed, when communities lead, ending AIDS by 2030 will be a reality, and who knows, we might do it earlier. Dr. Natalia has a video as well, so let's have the sound for the video for Prof. and Dr. Natalia.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, partners, and colleagues, dear young people, it's a privilege to address you all for the opening of ICASA 2023. From the outset, let me say this. Ending AIDS will be determined by what happens in Africa. We have the tools to end new HIV infections in Africa and make AIDS history. The host country of this conference, Zimbabwe, a shining example, recording the highest decline in new HIV infections across Africa since 2010, demonstrating that with the right investments in prevention, we can change course. Still, inequalities remain the biggest barrier to reducing new HIV infections. That's why prevention efforts must tackle inequalities, especially gender discrimination, and uphold the rights of adolescent girls and young women in Africa. Their incidence rates are persistently high, 3 times higher than boys and men. So I applaud your unwavering commitment to ending AIDS, despite the heavy burden of the disease on your communities and countries. UNFPA is here to support you, to accelerate access to comprehensive sexuality education, to advance transformative actions for gender equality and the exercise of bodily autonomy, and to help young people to access the services they need. Halfway to the Sustainable Development Goals deadline, this is no time for half measures. Full and equal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights for Africa's 1.5 billion people is crucial in our urgent, joined-up efforts to leave no one behind. Let's not miss this opportunity to unite for the action and impact we want to see. I hope you use this powerful forum to listen, to learn, to share, to work together, to bring about the changes we need for the health of Africa and for our collective future. There's a proverb, if you wish to move mountains tomorrow, start by lifting stones today. Together, step by step, stone by stone, with your leadership and your partnership, we can achieve Africa's HIV targets and bring the end of AIDS within our reach.
Your Excellency, President MNANGAGWA of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Your Excellency, President Philippe Nyusi of Mozambique, Honorable Ministers of Health, including the Honorable Minister of Health of Zimbabwe, Honorable Ministers of other sectors, Dr. David Parirenyatwa, the ICASA 2023 President, civil society and community leaders, and I'd like to really commend our young colleague Yolanda for her very inspiring sharing of her views with us. Ms. Winnie, Byanyima, Executive Director of UNAIDS, Ms. Lydia Zikomo, the Regional Director of UNFPA for East and Southern Africa, my colleague, the Chair of the Society for AIDS in Africa, Dr. Luke, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I want to start by saying how very pleased I am to be with you today, and my profound thanks on behalf of WHO for the invitation to be here. I'm here with a number of colleagues, including our country representative, colleagues from our headquarters, our regional office, and country offices. Thank you, Your Excellency President MNANGAGWA, and the government and people of Zimbabwe for hosting the ICASA 2023. And on a personal note, being a child of a neighboring country to Zimbabwe, I'll ask for your forgiveness for saying how very pleased I am to be back in Harare. First of all, I joined WHO when the regional office had been evacuated to Zimbabwe when there was a crisis in the Republic of the Congo. Maybe WHO being here encouraged me to look for a job in that organization. And my association with Zimbabwe, if you'll forgive another personal note, really starts from my childhood, when, as a teenager living in Francistown, I used to go to Bulawayo to the dentist. So that tells us how long the health system in Zimbabwe has been capable of providing care to people even in the neighborhood. I lived here in Zimbabwe working with WHO when we worked on the 3x5 initiative to increase access to treatment for people living with HIV/AIDS, when many innovations were made. And I even have a Zimbabwean marriage certificate, but I won't go into that story. We have collectively, it's already been said, made tremendous progress in addressing the multifaceted suffering and devastation at the personal, family, national, and continental level caused by the HIV pandemic, one of the greatest health crises in human history. As a former National AIDS Program Manager, who had the distinction of representing the world's worst and highest HIV prevalence country at that time, Botswana, at international conferences in the 1980s and 1990s, I really celebrate the progress that's been made. I congratulate everyone, communities, governments, partners who have made the effort for having brought us this far. You know, AIDS is a story often told by numbers. We say and hear things like, the African region is home to 2/3 of people living with HIV and AIDS. Of course, it translates to heartbreaking numbers, and they help us understand the sheer overwhelming magnitude of this tragedy and challenge. But repeated by themselves, the statistics hide the individual stories, the tragedies, the hopes, and the heroic courage of people living with HIV and AIDS, and we've already heard some of it expressed here today, and their families and loved ones. People like Dudu Dlamini, who came out as HIV positive in Durban early in the struggle and was murdered by her neighbors. They couldn't bear the thought that living among them was this dreadful disease. Tendai from Zimbabwe, the first person openly living with HIV to get vaccinated for COVID-19, who used her story to fight misinformation publicly. And this, the COVID-19 experience, has proved to us the power of community and communication in influencing the actions of people. We saw how community voices made people either accept or reject being vaccinated for COVID-19, whatever the science said. Dorothy from South Africa, who offered her house as a venue for a WHO HIV mobile clinic so services could continue in her neighborhood while everything had been stopped by the COVID-19 pandemic. Bayo from Nigeria named her child Good News. She wanted to prove to her community that it's possible to keep the disease from passing to a child. And we know many other heroes, I can't name them all, some who worked as leaders at the national level, some at the international level, some in our neighborhoods. And I'm very pleased that we are emphasizing the role of communities in this conference today. These stories are above all validating the voices from communities. In the early days of the pandemic and the response, when the world was in denial, it's communities who spoke up to fight the silence and stigma. I recall the power of communities shouting down the president of a very powerful nation who could not make a public speech until he resolved to respond. And we've seen a wonderful movement today and an investment in a partner to the global response that's made a huge difference. That has been the power of communities. Communities have been at the forefront of the battle against discrimination, and we've heard that articulated already today. They were the advocates who campaigned and took action for increased access to antiretroviral therapy and care ensuring that no one will be left behind. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they played a key role in assuring access, as I said, to antiretrovirals and also to other health services through their structured advocacy. So we are determined in WHO to incorporate their experiences into the region's future health service delivery strategies, because clearly at the community level, we have huge opportunities to expand the reach of health services of each type. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to our joint efforts, and I will not name all the global, national, and regional institutions that have partnered to provide support on HIV/AIDS, we have seen major progress. Between 2010 and 2022, new HIV infections dropped by 53%, and HIV-related deaths fell by 48%. In the same period, the number of people on antiretroviral treatment increased from 21% to nearly 80% of those that are eligible. Zimbabwe, our host country, and others such as Botswana and Eswatini have achieved and even surpassed the 95-95-95 targets. Thank you, Your Excellency President MNANGAGWA, for your direct role in this achievement. It's proved yet again that high-level political leadership in HIV/AIDS control makes all the difference. Another major factor in successful HIV management is the integration of services. Here also, Zimbabwe has led and shown us good examples. We've seen comprehensive packages of quality family planning services such as contraceptives, HIV prevention and treatment services in an environment free of stigma and discrimination. We've also seen catching up happen in West and Central Africa because they were less severely affected than East and Southern Africa. That work had to be purposefully done, and we're very encouraged by the progress that has happened. The response to HIV has evolved in an increasingly complex environment, amplified by the pandemic, also amplified by the impacts of climate change. We've seen how resources have shifted or are shifting and drew their attention to health systems gaps and further exposed disparities and inequalities among vulnerable populations. I'm really encouraged that we in WHO have re-emphasized the importance of primary health care as a route towards universal health coverage. And we know that primary health care cannot function without strong and effective connection, engagement with communities. So again, emphasizing the important role of the people who are affected, the people who have influence at the community level. This cannot be done only by doctors and scientists in the health systems of our countries. I'm very encouraged that there's a conversation going on now among the global health initiatives, the Global Fund, Gavi, and others, around how to finally work together, integrate their efforts, and target the health systems right down to the primary health care and community levels in our countries, work on mobilizing community health workers, but importantly, make the connection with people affected and communities so that we really have a comprehensive and more effective response to HIV and AIDS. We've been reminded already eloquently by the dancers, by our colleague who spoke earlier, that AIDS is not over. Because with the increase in access and uptake of life-saving antiretrovirals, our focus now needs to be, in addition, on preventing new infections. That means focusing and working with key populations, with adolescents and young women, with sex workers, with men who have sex with men, with injecting drug users, transgender women and people, prison populations, and that ensuring that the many barriers they continue to face in accessing health services are eliminated. We need to collectively do more, including reviewing and reforming the legislation and policies that create barriers to evidence-based interventions and services. So I'd like to thank all the people that are directly affected that I have named for their courage and their innovations that they have fostered and that they sometimes have had to push very, very hard in difficult circumstances in countries. We urge that the lessons that they have learned and are sharing with us be taken on board as we work to overcome inequity in health. They need a place in decision-making mechanisms from the local level right up to the highest level in countries and advising in international actors. We must do more to ensure that the voice and influence of people affected directly is mobilized, is listened to, and is learned from in our actions at all levels. AIDS is not over because we must leverage innovations, including new treatment regimens, new prevention approaches, and vaccines supported by research that includes the needs of resource-limited settings. And it's critical that these and technology be urgently scaled up and adapted to our context in the African region. This includes gene therapy, which I spoke about earlier and was very touched by the reaction of a person living with HIV, self-testing technology, expanded access to pre-exposure prophylaxis, and the use of technology and artificial intelligence, digital technology, in all sorts of ways. It offers so much possibility. We saw the speed with which COVID-19 tools were developed, approved, and used. So it's possible. What is needed is the will of all of us, from the highest political level, the health leaders, and the communities that are affected. It is possible. The successful clinical trials of new malaria vaccines, I think they've already been mentioned, are another example, so I will not go into that. I'd just like to commit to you that as WHO, we'll continue to engage with our member states within the broader partnerships to provide policy and strategic direction and technical support and resources to end the HIV epidemic. Working with diverse stakeholders, with governments, with communities, with researchers, with scientists, and with funding partners, and advancing South-South cooperation, we shall sustain our commitment to end the epidemics of HIV and other communicable diseases. That way, the struggles of our colleague Yolanda, of people like Tendai, the Dorothys, the Bios, who live the daily drama of this epidemic, in fact, pandemic, would see a brighter future. I'd like, on behalf of WHO, to wish everyone, all my colleagues and friends who are here from our many years of association, a very productive and stimulating conference. Thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to working with you to implement the decisions made here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moeti, for those remarks. It's now time for us to hear from the United Nations Executive Director and Undersecretary, that's Ms. Winnie Byanyima. She's going to give us remarks from the Joint United Nations Program on HIV and AIDS, that's UNAIDS.
Thank you, Director of the Program. Your Excellency, the President of Zimbabwe, President MNANGAGWA, Your Excellency, Filippo Jacinto Nyusi, President of Mozambique, Your Excellencies, the two Vice Presidents of Zimbabwe, Honorable Ministers present here, Honorable Dr. Parirenyatwa, the ICASA President, my colleagues, Regional Directors of the United Nations, WHO and UNFPA, Chidi and Lydia, civil society and communities represented here so well by Ms. Yolanda Munyengwa, the UN family, Excellencies, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, Mangwanani, Sambonani, Jambo, Jambo, bonjour, hola, bon dia, greetings. It's a great honor. It's a great honor to address ICASA at the opening session. Excellencies, I bring you the greetings of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres and his Deputy Secretary General, Her Excellency Amna Mohammed, our sister. ICASA is a moment for us to gather, to take stock on progress towards the 2030 SDG goal of ending AIDS as a public health threat, and to consider future directions and sustainability of the response. This meeting brings together so many inspirational leaders, these leaders of the struggle to end AIDS. Excellency Presidents, we are a movement. We are a movement like ZANU-PF, like Frelimo. Our war is to end that, is against that virus, the HIV virus. The vanguard of our movement are people living with HIV. They are the activists who work every day on the ground. That is the vanguard of our HIV movement. We are health workers, we are scientists, philanthropists, governments. There are around 5,000 of us who have gathered here in Harare or online for this meeting, committing to continue in our struggle to end AIDS. That is our power. We are a movement. I'm delighted that this session is being held in Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe is one of the countries making the fastest progress in the world. So it's right that we are here. And so I salute you, Your Excellency Mnangagwa, President of Zimbabwe. I salute your spouse, First Lady, Dr. Xilia Mnangagwa, whom I met recently in Victoria Falls, for your sustained leadership and engagement in the response. Let us take stock of where we are now. And in doing so, it's right that we celebrate some amazing successes of this great country. 78% reduction of new infections in the last 13 years. This is the highest decline in the Eastern and Southern African region. And that is the region making fastest progress. The treatment scale-up that has led to 64% decrease in AIDS-related deaths. That's one of the highest. And Zimbabwe's achievement of our midterm targets, which we call 95, 95, 95. You don't have to know what that means. You just need to know that midway towards the 2030 goal, there are some targets for treatment, and that Zimbabwe hit them well before 2025. These are big achievements. This progress is a result of a formidable partnership, a partnership between the government, between communities, civil society, and between global solidarity of partner governments. The partner governments are mainly the United States through PEPFAR and other major donors through the Global Fund. I must not forget, too, the foundations, such as the Gates Foundation and others. It's this partnership that's driven this success. So well done. Going to the region, I'm so proud to say that there are 5 countries, including Zimbabwe, that have also already achieved those midterm targets of 2025. Botswana, Eswatini, Rwanda, and Tanzania. 16 other countries are close to them, also heading towards achieving the midterm targets, meaning that we could end AIDS as a public health threat in those countries by 2030. So, that's good news to celebrate. But all is not well. As we take stock, I also want to turn to the challenges. We have saved 3.4 million lives of children from AIDS by stopping mother-child transmission and by putting children on treatment. But while we have 83% of all adults living with HIV on treatment, we only have 55% of children living with HIV on treatment. We are leaving children behind. In West and Central Africa, only 37% of all children living with HIV are on treatment, meaning the majority are not and will die. This is an inequality for children. Globally, 30 million people are on treatment, but 9.2 million others are not on treatment. And why? Who are they? Let's unpack that. When we unpack that, 1.3 million new infections globally last year, over 50% of them were right here in Africa. Why Africa? When you look at the deaths too, majority of the deaths were here in Africa. Why Africa? I'll come back to that. Why is it our continent? In 2022, if we look at those who are newly infected here in our own region, 63% of new infections were of adolescent girls and young women. That's serious. The face of new infections are our girls, our daughters, and young women. 3,100 girls aged between 15 and 24 acquire HIV every week right here on our continent. This is not the case elsewhere. So why? Inequality. AIDS is an injustice of inequalities. When you look at all those who are newly infected, look at those who have died, you will see that they face inequalities, and that is why they can't access prevention and treatment that are quite available. Let's talk about the girls. There is a culture of male domination and male control over women's bodies that runs right from the family level through public institutions. Sexual violence is tolerated by our societies. Early marriage is practiced by many of our communities. These are examples of what is driving HIV. The lack of control, the domination that leads to lack of control over one's body. This is important. This is social norms. Social norms are our own. It is us who can change them. It's the whole of society that must change them. It isn't just civil society. It is civil society, it is governments, it's companies. We all must move towards gender equal norms, non-violent social norms. That is the most important way to protect. But also public policies. Our public policies do not equalize. They widen existing inequalities. Let me give you an example. UNESCO has estimated that around the world, there are 129 million girls out of school, including 97 million not in secondary school. Most of these are in Africa, by the way. What does that mean? School is the best protection from HIV, from sexual violence. School is the space where a girl is protected up to the time she's an adult. If she's not in school, she's not safe. But why aren't our governments rolling out free universal secondary education for the protection of our girls and for all the other gains that we get from public education? It's a public policy issue. Every time a woman dies in childbirth, every time a girl dies in childbirth or in an unsafe abortion, this is a failure of public policy. Because if public policy puts a priority on women's lives, we shouldn't have a woman dying in childbirth. She will be taken care of from the time she conceives to the time she delivers her baby. So public policies, when they don't prioritize the lives of women and girls, that is what you get, rising infections amongst girls and young women. Take sexual and gender-based violence. We have laws against them. Yes, we do. But our institutions that should prevent and that should address it when it happens, the law and order, the judiciaries, these are often not with enough resources or capacity to tackle this challenge of sexual and gender-based violence. So it goes unpunished. Impunity leads to more and more lack of safety for girls and young women. So we have to work on the public policies to equalize for girls and women in the society. Tackle sexual violence, keep the girls in school, and all this. That's why we are working with 15 African countries that have decided to roll out ambitiously universal secondary education and put in place the policies that will keep a girl safe in school. UNAIDS, UNESCO, UNFPA, UNICEF, UN Women, and us UNAIDS are supporting these 15 governments that have made these commitments. I invite all other governments too to join this move where we bring students, parents, teachers, investors to all push in one direction that will not only reduce new infections, but will empower girls, prepare them for jobs, and arrange make them good mothers, have safe births, and so on. So let's address the inequalities that hurt girls, and we will be on the road to reducing new infections in Africa. I want to turn to key populations, including gay men, men who have sex with men, sex workers, transgender people, people in prisons, people who inject. Governments agreed at the last high-level meeting on AIDS that they will reform those laws that drive inequality for these groups and undermine the AIDS response. Let me be clear here that every government makes its own laws for its people and that we at the UN will respect sovereignty. And this is a big and, we at the UN, in the joint program, we gather data, we develop strategies, we pilot programs, and we show what works to end AIDS. Here is our evidence that criminalizing LGBTQ people for who they are or who they love drives them away from HIV services. Countries that don't criminalize have made more progress on the goals of, for example, reducing HIV viral suppression. They have lower rates of HIV infection among gay men. This is the evidence we have. So the good news is this, that thank you. The good news is this, that the tide is turning. African countries are moving away from archaic laws. Here in Africa, we are seeing it. Since 2016, Angola, Botswana, Gabon, Mauritius, Seychelles, these are some of the countries that have repealed criminalizing LGBTQ people. They've joined countries like India, Singapore, Barbados, and others. So the movement is in the right direction. Some say that this is a Western agenda, but I honestly say no. It is our agenda, we Africans ourselves. I'll quote for you the Supreme Court of Mauritius, an African country. In overturning their criminal law, they wrote, I quote, that old law, which they repealed, quote, was not the expression of domestic democratic will, but was a course imposed on Mauritius and other colonies by British rule, unquote. They are colonial laws. Let's get rid of them. I urge all countries that haven't removed punitive laws against marginalized groups to do so. A first step can be to stop the arrests and prosecutions, non-enforcement of those laws. And I was very happy to visit a clinic of sex workers in Victoria Falls. I was so impressed to see that for Zimbabwe, which also criminalizes sex work, that actually the law has been reformed to a point where it isn't being enforced and sex workers are receiving services and their rates of infection have dropped. This is amazing. This is leadership. We want to see either the laws repealed or not enforced so that people can come and get what they need. So lastly, I asked why Africa? Africa, we are behind, or rather we have the highest burden. It is not because we are bad people, we have got bad morals, as some people may want to say. No, we could fight and win, but there are some constraints that are outside our hands. Two major constraints. The financial system, international financial system, is rigged against our continent. It should be reformed. Our countries are highly indebted today, paying more to servicing the debt than to the health systems that shoulder the HIV response, all because these debts were acquired at very high interests, higher than rich countries borrow on the market. They doubled and tripled when the Ukraine war broke out, a war we had nothing to do with, but a war that resulted in a higher interest costs and lower investment in our health, and no relief, not enough relief for all those external reasons that have put us in this kind of indebtedness. Taxation, another rigged system of global corporate taxation, where we don't collect enough revenues because companies can hide their profits and put their money in tax havens. We lose billions on this continent through tax dodging. This must be reformed. African countries, they went to the UN 2 weeks ago. They pushed a motion that was passed by the majority of countries calling for a conference to discuss corporate tax reform so that we can start to get the revenues due to our people. This motion was supported by most countries of the world. Only 44 rich countries who are benefiting from the status quo opposed the motion, but it passed. So congratulations to the leaders of Africa. This conference must happen. We must rally and support it. We cannot end AIDS unless we can get the taxes that are due to us and pay for our own response. We cannot end AIDS unless we can also borrow on fair terms and get our debt also recycled when we need restructuring. So with those, I want to end on communities. Communities, we are saying let communities lead. Let's mean it. Let's mean it. It means resourcing the communities. The donors who are here, you are putting money in the response, but you have reduced the flow of resources to communities. 9 years ago, communities were getting 30% of the total resource. Today, they are getting 21%. It's declining. Invest in communities to do the work they do. Secondly, free the space for communities to work. In the last 10 years, we've seen more and more laws squeezing the space for civil society to work. Open the space. So civil society is not in the way. They are lighting the way. Civil society is not the problem, it is the solution. Let us free the space. Yes. In my organization, we are the only part of the United Nations that includes civil society from the lowest level to the highest level. They sit on our board. We are proud that they are board members governing our organization. Civil society sit on all our committees, technical committees, human rights committees. We involve civil society everywhere. And that's why I asked Yolanda to sit there with me. She was going to be the only main speaker who's not sitting right there. And that's not right. So let's mean it. Let's mean it that we empower civil society to do their work. Excellencies, thank you very much. And we take away a lot of good lessons from Zimbabwe to the rest of Africa. We will end AIDS.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Byanyima. That's the United Nations Executive Director and Under Secretary, that's UNAIDS. We continue with our program, and for now we are going to have a short entertainment interlude. you, Harare College of Music. I'd now like to call upon Dr. Douglas Mombeshora. He is the Minister of Health and Child Care and also the ICASA 2023 Vice President, to come and give us brief remarks as well as introduce the Honorable Vice President CGDN Chiwenga. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, our Master of Ceremony, Tariro. Let me start by recognizing our President, His Excellency Dr. MNANGAGWA, the President of the Republic of Mozambique, President Nyusi, our Vice President, Comrade Retired General Dr. CGDN Chiwenga, our Honorable Vice President, Colonel Retired KCD MOHADI, the Minister for Provincial Affairs and Devolution for Harare Metropolitan Province, Comrade Tavengwa, our ICASA 2023 President, Dr. Parirenyatwa, colleague ministers here present from Zimbabwe and from our neighboring countries and beyond, deputy ministers here present, the Chief Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Dr. M. Rishwaya, Chairman of the Public Service Commission, Dr. Vincent Ungwe, service chiefs here present, senior government officials, let me say all protocols observed. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, I'm very glad to see this day arriving, putting a cap on more than 1 year of processes and hard work by the organizing committees as we prepared to host Africa's Premier Health Conference. I'm very excited that Zimbabwe is hosting the International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa, that is ICASA, physically this year after COVID-19 imposed restrictions. Advances in science and research have made this possible as we finally scored medical successes against COVID-19. ICASA is about research and science, which I am hopeful will equip us with new with knowledge and science useful in better responding to AIDS pandemic, Ebola, and other emerging pandemics. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Zimbabwe's response to HIV has been resilient over the years, offering best practices in HIV prevention and treatment as well as domestic financing, which have led to continuous reduction of disease burden and achievement of the 95-95-95 targets. Despite these achievements, we know our way to the top is still far away. Although new infections still continue to occur, it has become very difficult to identify them, and that is why we are innovating with various risk and cohort-based mechanisms targeting most at-risk groups so that we empty the pockets of new infections. In doing this, we are also focusing on addressing inequalities and promoting inclusion so that we leave no one behind, particularly key populations. Addressing health inequalities and promoting inclusion will ensure that we promote openness in pursuit and utilization of available prevention and treatment services. This year's theme, I quote, AIDS is not over. Address inequalities, accelerate inclusion and innovation, close quote, is therefore very well placed to inform our response as that of the rest of the continent to reach the last mile in responding to HIV and other epidemics. Your Excellencies and distinguished delegates, we have put together an exciting program comprising various leadership sessions, abstracts-driven sessions, and satellites, as well as the community village that I am confident that will be beneficial to our programming and response. I'm very happy with the level of response from delegates who have registered and have applied for visas to participate in the conference. I am indeed pleased with the level of interest and the participation of our local people, some of whom will present leading abstracts and lead key discussions in various sessions and the community at large. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the government of Zimbabwe has mobilized all its systems and structures from security, banking, accommodation, transportation, health, and others to ensure a successful conference. Let me assure our delegates that our health systems are on alert to ensure that necessary services are provided as needed. At this juncture, allow me to invite our Vice President, General Retired Dr. Chiwenga, to come and introduce our guest of honor. Thank you.
Director of Ceremonies, Ms. Tariro Makanga, the President of the Republic of Mozambique, His Excellency Dr. Filipe Jacinto Nyusi, our First Lady of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Her Excellency Dr. MNANGAGWA in absentia, Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Honorable Colonel Retired Kembo Dugish MOHADI, Minister for Provincial Affairs and Devolution, Harare Metropolitan Province, Honorable Charles Tavengwa, Minister of Health and Child Care, Dr. Douglas Mombeshora, other honorable ministers here present, the 2023 ICASA President, Honorable Dr. David Parirenyatwa, joined the United Nations Program on HIV/AIDS, Winnie, Byanyima, let me ride on all protocols. Good afternoon to you all, or a good evening. In actual fact, it's evening now. It is with great pleasure that I stand before you to introduce the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency Comrade Dr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, our guest of honor for this important occasion. Let me start by welcoming all the delegates and visitors to our country as we host the International AIDS Conference on AIDS and sexually transmitted infections in Africa. Indeed, this is a momentous occasion as Zimbabwe joins hands with other regional countries to attain universal health coverage for our people. Distinguished guests, our guest of honor has set this country on a transformative and developmental path towards the realization of an empowered and prosperous upper middle income society by 2030. To that end, health and well-being were identified as key pillars in the National Development Strategy 1, a blueprint that anchors the achievement of that vision. It is common cause that good health makes an important contribution to economic progress, as a healthy population is more productive and live longer. Through his visionary leadership, His Excellency the President, Comrade Dr. Emmerson Dambudzo-Mnangagwa, noted that ICASA offers Zimbabwe an important platform to showcase our progress in response to HIV and also learn from our brothers and sisters across the continent of Africa and beyond. The devastation caused by the recent COVID-19 and AIDS over the years has taught us to be resilient and build capacity in the entire health delivery system. Therefore, it is important that this conference comes up with innovative means to collectively improve our health system, and specifically the response to HIV and emerging epidemics. I am pleased to highlight that following the submission of our bid to host the conference, the delegation of the Society of AIDS in Africa visited Zimbabwe to conduct assessments. Although it was not mandatory to meet the President, President Mnangagwa invited the delegation to State House and had a meeting with them. He demonstrated rare leadership and made financial commitments to support the country's bid. In essence, he has made this conference a success. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at this juncture to invite our guest of honor, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency Dr. Emmerson Dambudzo-Mnangagwa, to deliver his official opening remarks for the 2023 International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa. Your Excellency.
May you be seated. Our Director of Ceremonies, Comrade Tariro, I hope I'm correct. In our absentia, the First Lady of the Republic of Zimbabwe, my dear brother, the President of the Republic of Mozambique, Engineer President Jacinto Nyusi, the Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Honorable General Retired Dr. Sijiren Chwenga, Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Honorable Colonel Retired KCD Mohadi, the Minister of State for Harare Metropolitan Province, Charles Tavengwa, Honorable Charles Tavengwa, and Erika, Minister of Health and Child Care of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Honorable Dr. Mombeshora, the Executive Director, United Nations Population Fund, Dr. N. Kanem, Executive Director, UNAIDS, W. Byanyima, Society for AIDS and Africa and ICASA 2023 President, Dr. Parirenyatwa David, other honorable ministers of health from Africa who are present here, the Chief Secretary of the President Cabinet, Dr. Shwaya, senior government officials who are here, Regional Director for Africa, World Health Organization, Dr. M.R. Moeti, development partners who are here, distinguished conference delegates, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends. It is my singular honor and privilege to address you at this official opening ceremony for the 24th International Conference on AIDS and Sexually Transmitted Infections in Africa. On behalf of the government and people of Zimbabwe, I wish to express my profound gratitude for the opportunity accorded to Zimbabwe to host this very important conference for the second time. I hope you have found the facilities and arrangements suitable for a successful meeting. In view of the growing incidences of epidemics and conflicts, coupled with the negative impact of climate change, this conference is most opportune as it allows us to reflect on our ongoing responses to HIV and AIDS at both the continental and the global levels. The theme and accord, AIDS is not over, address inequities, accelerate inclusion and innovation, end of quote, is a befitting reminder on the need to remain focused and avoid complacency. We must thus keep our eyes on the ball and consolidate the milestones we have achieved over the years. The 2022 report by the United Nations AIDS clearly reflects that AIDS continues to claim lives and is a call for continued action. Regrettably, new HIV infections continue to be prevalent among our people, and our women accounted for 63% of all new infections, while new HIV infections among adolescent girls and young women remain widespread in sub-Saharan Africa. We should never relax. AIDS is not over. The pandemic remains one of the silent threats to sustainable socio-economic development. It is, however, commendable that we have made progress and positive outcomes through our robust interventions, which are infusing the hope that we can indeed eliminate AIDS. Many countries in Africa, including Zimbabwe, have already achieved the 95 fast-track targets. This is applauded. Congratulations. In case of Zimbabwe, Between 2018 and 2022, our country managed to reduce new HIV infections as well as AIDS-related deaths. We are committed to addressing the gaps and inequalities that exist in access to HIV services to sustain this progress and push back the HIV frontiers to end AIDS by 2030. It is also critically important to ensure that both adolescent girls and boys, as well as young women, have unfettered and equal access to HIV services. Equally, there is need to address HIV/AIDS pandemic holistically, including through addressing matters to do with guaranteeing food security and nutrition of our communities, beginning at the household level. Let us therefore implement robust and responsive sustainable development programs and projects to lift more of our people out of poverty and eradicate inequalities that may be triggers to new HIV infections, especially among most risk groups. Encouraging early testing and promoting adherence to treatment, as well as fighting stigma and discrimination, remain key aspects to reversing silence and untreated infections. In addition, it is imperative to sustain focus on social and cultural practices that increase risk and exposure of women and children to HIV. Ladies and gentlemen, our success of ending HIV/AIDS by 2030 is imminent. It is encouraging that the Society for AIDS in Africa have responded to the urgent realities of the time and ever-changing health environment on our continent. I therefore commend you for expanding the scope of the conference to include discussions on key thematic areas such as pathways for leadership in HIV and AIDS initiatives, building resilience and sustainable HIV prevention programming, along with other emergencies and epidemics. The recent COVID-19 and ongoing threats of Ebola, as well as other tropical diseases, have taught us the need for integration of these and other responses, underpinned by the principle of universal health coverage. As a continent, we must harness our rich and diverse flora and fauna endowment through the deployment of science, technology, and innovation to establish a vibrant African traditional medicines pharmaceutical industry in our respective jurisdictions. We must, as Africa, never shy away from building on our rich African knowledge systems and God-given resources to have scientifically viable medical products and solutions for our own domestic communities. Through such an approach, we should reverse the high disease burden and the related mortality on our motherland, Africa. For us in Zimbabwe, our national development philosophy is, in Shona, nyika inovakwa, igotongwa, igonamatirwa, never. I'll try to translate. This simply means that a country is built and it must be governed, and it must be prayed for by its own people. As the people of this great continent, we must build our respective countries and proffer the solutions needed to address our own continental challenges. Others from elsewhere should come to help and complement us based on our own developmental priorities. Hence, the mantra, African solutions for African problems, must transcend to the manner we address epidemics and other existential threats to our nations. Intra-Africa collaboration must be deepened, and the partnerships with the private sector and development partners harnessed to leap forward our response. Dear distinguished delegates, conferences, meetings, and workshops alone are not enough if they are not backed by deliberate and concrete action plans to promote and achieve HIV funding sustainability. Here in Zimbabwe, the National AIDS Trust Fund has contributed over 30% of all our treatment needs and financed the various prevention and coordination interventions. We are available to share key lessons learned through this approach to this issue. Zimbabwe is open for business and ready to welcome investments, joint ventures, partnerships, and innovations for the manufacture as well as distribution of medical equipment, medicines, and consumables, among other requirements. Finally, on behalf of the people of Zimbabwe, I once again express our gratitude to the organizers, the partners, and the supporters of this conference for giving us the opportunity to host this event. I invite you all to explore our magnificent tourism destinations and attractions, which include the mighty Victoria Falls. But that is not its correct name. That is an English name. It is called the Moshiotunya. The smoke that thunders. That is the correct name. But when we say, come and see Moshiotunya, people don't come. But when we say, come and see Victoria Falls, they fly in. With these remarks, it is now my singular honor and pleasure to declare the 22nd edition of the International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa officially opened. I wish you all a memorable, successful, and productive meeting. God bless you all. I thank you.
Our Vice President, let me say again, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for officially opening this prestigious event. Thank you so much. Let me now ask our Vice President, Colonel Retired KCD MOHADI, to come and give a vote of thanks. Comrade MOHADI.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Head of Government, and Commander of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Mozambique, Comrade Nyusi. Your Excellency, let me also acknowledge Her Excellency, the First Lady, Dr. Auxilia MNANGAGWA in absentia. My colleague, Honorable General Retired Dr. C.G.D. N. Chiwenga, the Minister of State for Provincial Affairs and Devolution for Harare Metropolitan Province, Comrade Charles Tavengwa. Let me recognize all the ministers here present and those from other countries that have come to join us at this conference. Your Excellency, let me say, since all the protocols have been established before me, let me just say that allow me to ride on all the protocols that have been established. Your Excellency, they say gratitude is not the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all the other virtues. I deem it a great honor, Your Excellency, indeed my privilege, to propose a vote of thanks at this 22nd edition of the ICASA conference. I wish to thank the people who contributed to the success of this conference. And first and foremost, I wish to thank most sincerely our host, His Excellency the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Dr. MNANGAGWA, for putting in place such an impressive and decent conference here at the Rainbow Towers in Harare, Zimbabwe. I've always said hosting an event of the size of and magnitude of the size and magnitude like this conference we have today is not an easy task. It takes a worm's view to attend to the details of organizing such a seamless event such as this conference. Let us appreciate that the wheels of this conference started turning a long time ago. My gratefulness should be remiss if I don't acknowledge and recognize Her Excellency, the First Lady of Mozambique. I'm told she was in Victoria Falls with our First Lady. On behalf of my fellow countrymen, and indeed on my own behalf, I would like to express my deepest appreciation of the presence of the President of Mozambique amongst us, Comrade Felipe Jacinto Nyusi. Your presence here, sir, has made this conference quite befitting. Once again, I thank you, President Nyusi and Madam Nyusi. And I hope and trust that Your Excellency, you will find time to sample out our humble facilities and find whether they are useful to your requirements. But it wouldn't be over. But the First Lady, the First Lady of Mozambique has been to Victoria Falls. I think it would also be remiss of the President of Mozambique if he doesn't go to Victoria Falls. The President, he said that Victoria Falls is a colonial name, but we use it because it brings tourists into our country. The real name is, as he said, Musiwa Tunya. We must always remember that Zimbabwe and Mozambique share a history of togetherness that stretches as far back as the liberation struggle of this country, in which Mozambican people paid supreme sacrifice. I also wish to take this opportunity, Your Excellency, to thank all the speakers at this conference and participants, without whom there would have been no conference to talk about at all. Our speakers, most importantly, our guest speaker, Dr. MNANGAGWA, shared nuggets of wisdom and initiated critical conversation on issues such as mainstreaming, inclusion, equality, diversity in the control and mitigation of the impact of HIV/AIDS. The discussions from this conference will for a long time remain etched in our memories. I also wish to take this opportunity, Your Excellency, to thank our speakers for the unanimous call for strengthening domestic financing of health sectors of Africa. Such an initiative will ensure sustainable financing of programs in health. To our participants, allow me also to express my sincere gratitude to each and every one of you for making time from your busy schedules to attend this conference. Let me also, in a special way, thank the Minister of Health and Child Care, led by Dr. Mombeshora, for collaborating with other partners to ensure Zimbabwe hosted such a successful ICASA conference. I wish to convey my thanks to all our service providers, entertainers, the media, for being a part of this unique conference. Let us continue to work together in our quest to build the Africa's health sector. We say to you all, Harambe, let's pull together. We are in this together. I wish you all journey mercies as you travel back to your respective countries. And to our visitors from other countries, please travel safely back. Please carry to your families our best wishes from Zimbabwe. I thank you, Your Excellency. Do not end this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Vice President, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our official opening ceremony. May we all rise as His Excellency and the tape table leave. And I would like to invite Fusion Band to play for us.
Dini mwendambe, ndakuchinja mutemo. Salura yodura, tanziga yongo manyangwe ukuzama undura. Ndakuchinja mutemo. Salura yodura, tanziga yongo manyangwe ukuzama undura. Oh, mama. Era siga, kutonga kwaro. Ngoma bainera, ngoma ya makachaira. Rino fazanendera, ngambara makachaira. Kutonga kwaro, kutonga kwaro, kutonga kwaro, kutonga kwaro, kutonga kwaro, kutonga kwaro. Aywa hongore, herendende wasigana. Hongore, herendende mushadu. Aywa hongore, herendende wasigana. Aywa hongore, herendende mushadu. Ayere bakaranga moshkura musura. Kwanzika Maria rinotonga musha. Zizo garozika panze rinosiya tinda. Kangoma kevidu kaega no fire katinda.